What is the point of freezing starter? Freezing your active immature sourdough starter is an easy way to preserve your starter, so that way if for some reason you can't bake for a while, maybe you get sick or you're taking vacation or you just don't feel like it, or even worse, if your starter turns moldy, for example, you have some sourdough starters set aside, ready to go, and you don't have to worry about making a brand new starter when you get back to baking. Now, if you don't have a sourdough starter, be sure to check out my simple guide to making and using sourdough starter ebook. It's totally free. It's 30+ pages of how to make a sourdough starter, how to make your first loaf of sourdough bread, and how to use sourdough discard recipes. To freeze your sourdough starter, you will need a healthy, active, mature sourdough starter. So I actually tripled up this amount over the last day or two to freeze just for this video, but you will need enough starter to freeze. So if you need to, bulk up your starter for a few days. And you will also need something to freeze it in. I am using these cute little silicone baking molds. You could use an ice cube tray or any mold that you have, but my mission is to make things in my life both functional and beautiful without any extra work, so these are going to do the trick. So this is just a pretty way to freeze and preserve my sourdough starter. I got these on Amazon. I'll leave the link for them in the description box below. But let's go ahead and start freezing our starter. Freezing starter is incredibly simple, so just grab your silicone molds. If you don't have that, that's totally fine. You can use an ice cube tray or a muffin tin. Use whatever you have that can hold starter and can be put in the freezer, and begin spooning dollops of starter into your mold. A common question about freezing sourdough starter is, can I freeze inactive starter or sourdough starter discard? Technically, yes, but it may not yield the results that you want because some of the yeast will die in the freezer, but not all of it. So we want to have as much healthy active yeast as possible, so that way when we reactivate it later, we have great results. One mistake I made is I put the starter in the molds, then tried to put the molds onto a tray, and that was actually kind of challenging and I made a bit of a mess. So I recommend putting your molds on the tray first, then fill them and put them in the freezer. Okay, the starter is in the freezer. It needs to stay in there for about 12 to 24 hours. 12 hours is probably enough to freeze it. 24 would be better. I'm going to do 24 because it is 10 a.m. here and I'm filming. And in order for me to show you how to bag it, store it, thaw it, and use it, I need daylight. So I'm gonna let it sit for 24 hours and then I'm gonna show you how to use your frozen sourdough starter. I just checked on the starter in the freezer and it is frozen solid, so we are ready to go. I'm going to show you how to package your starter so you can freeze it for up to a year, and I'm going to show you how to reactivate it. So the next step is just to pop them out of the molds, and that's why I like the silicone because they come out really easily, and these turn out so cute. When I was handling these, they were melting kind of quickly from the heat of my hand, so just keep that in mind as you're bagging them. One important tip I have is to take one piece of your frozen sourdough starter and weigh it and write that on the bag, so that way when it comes time to reactivate it, you know how much that sourdough starter weighs. Then all you do is you put these in a freezer bag, seal it shut, label it with whatever information you need on it, and it can go in the freezer for up to 12 months, and you do not need to feed it at all during that time. To reactivate your frozen starter, just stick it in a jar, let it come to room temperature, and then begin a regular feeding every 12 hours of 1 part starter, 1 part flour, 1 part water. I have full video tutorials on how to feed your sourdough starter. I'll leave those in the description box below. But I do recommend for the feedings for at least the first 2 to use either all whole wheat or half whole wheat, half all purpose. That whole wheat flour will just give your starter the nutrient boost to really reactivate itself. I recommend feeding it every 12 hours until it starts to double regularly, and it will take a few feedings for it to completely reactivate. But then once it starts to double regularly after each feeding, then you can get back to business as usual with your sourdough. Thank you so much for tuning into Moon and Magnolia's YouTube channel, where we elevate the everyday from scratch at home, and I'll see you again next time.